We're back.
And this is what? Gus and
Travis talk film.
Okay. I got the choice this week, right?
Right.
Yes. And so my choice is to bring it close to home.
Okay.
The reason for that is, one, I've forgotten some of the things that we've done before, and I didn't want to repeat because I kept thinking, did we do the studio system? Did we do westerns? Did we do all of this?
Okay.
Anyway, but also, I think it's important because, Running Wild is doing what? Its biggest picture.
So far.
Not so far. And you've been going through a whole lot of processes with it, which you've been putting on, Facebook and everything else. But I thought it would be interesting to tell people, really what the subject matter is.
Okay.
Because you say, Durant never sleeps. It's about Jack Durant.
Durant's never closes.
Durant never closes.
Which is your title.
Yes, right.
I came up
with it, and now I'm forgetting it.
Right.
It's the Alzheimer's setting in early.
That's right.
Or late.
Right.
Who knows? Anyway, but a lot of people don't know anything about Jack Durant, and I found myself, when I tell people about a project, explaining it and who he was and why he's worthy of a film about him. And so I thought that's what we talk about, because I think you're doing it covers so many aspects of what Running Wild is about to start with.
In what way? I'm curious why you think that.
Well, Arizona subject.
Right.
That's
true.
That's the first
Arizona
thing.
story, yeah.
And the Arizona story, and I think the story is equal to any other story that we know. I mean, in terms of a larger-than-life personality.
Right.
And it isn't just like we just elevate into that. There were 3 books written on him?
Yep.
Yes, and a play?
A hit play. Sorry, one of our cameras already died.
So anyway, why don't you start by what attracted you to this and why you think, you want to make this picture?
So I think I first heard about Durant when I was probably passing in a car at some point past the restaurant, because it's still an existing restaurant in Phoenix. And I think it was my friend Dave Serber, who used to shoot some of my films, that said, "Oh, that's Durant's. That used to be, a famous mob hangout, right?" And then a couple years later, the New Times did a story about him, a cover story, and I think it was around the time that the play came out, and that's what had gotten the Durant story some attention again. And I read part of it, and then it was always at the back of my mind, Durant's. There's some kind of mob story there, and then at some point I heard that it was connected to Don Bolles, who was a reporter who was murdered here, which is probably the most famous Arizona story, or one of the most famous Arizona stories. And Ben Affleck had tried to make that into a movie, and I recently heard that Sean Penn had wanted to play Don Bolles. Now, I don't know if that's true, but again, it's just you hear these rumors. So it was at the back of my mind, and we even shot inside Durant's for our third feature, The Men Who Robbed the Bank. There's a scene where we shot there, met the owners, and they're really nice people. So at some point, I said, I want to make a movie about this. Well, I'll go to the play, right? So I go, Terry Earp, who she took a class from you,
right. I know.
I said, okay, I'll research the play. And I emailed her, and she sent me the play, and I read it, and I thought, this is really interesting. I might be able to riff off of this to make a film, right? But then I saw, the play is based on books. Well, if I'm going to option the play, then I better go back and option the books too. So I went and I met Mabel Leo, who wrote the books, and she wrote 3 books, The Saga of Jack Durant, Mob Mole, and Jack's World. And she gave me copies of all of them, and I read them, and then I said, okay, I want to option this, right? So I optioned the books and the play, and I wrote the screenplay in a few weeks. And really, people that are familiar with the play and the books will recognize lines here and there that I've taken, but really went our own direction with the movie. So I don't know if that completely answers what
that pretty much
the background on at least how I came to the project. When interesting, we had mentioned the title Durant's Never Closes.
Right, yes.
Originally, I didn't know what to call the film, but I really liked Durant's famous slogan, which is the finest eating and drinking establishment in the world.
Right.
And I thought that would be a really interesting title for the film. And as you might recall, and that's the first draft that I gave you, was
right,
called The Finest Eating and Drinking Establishment in the World. And you said, I really like the title, but then you said, what about Durant's Never Closes? And I was like, well, one, that fits a lot better on a poster.
Yes.
It's not such a mouthful. And it really started to ring in my head, and I was like, wow, that is a fantastic title. So that became the title of the film.
My concern with the other title was that it seemed to narrow the book down, the film down to being about restaurants.
Right.
And I think the subject is larger than that.
Yeah, and it is about restaurants. A lot of it is, but like you said, you don't want to limit the film.
Yeah, that's the only reason I said that. It sounds almost like an ad for a restaurant. The title. It sounds like agitprop in that direction. That's the reason I consider it.
I think what's nice about the title, which is I don't think either of us were thinking about necessarily when you mentioned it, is that it connects with the fact that Durant is a larger than life figure who's he died in 87, and we can keep talking about him, and his restaurant is still open and will probably be open hopefully for a very, very long time.
I think so too.
And basically he's the stuff of this story is legendary in Phoenix, and could end up being legendary
well, I think
throughout the
people
world.
know the background behind him. I'd been to the restaurant any number of times because when I first got here, which was around 84, frequently I'd meet with either reporters who were doing stories on the program I was doing on me, and they were always inviting me to Durant's, and I remember thinking, what a weird place, you go through the back and through the kitchen, and then I would sit around, and at night I'd met people, I'd gone there for dinner, and there were always actors there, and actors really congregate, and I found out that it was sort of a center for artists, working actors in the area, etc. But I knew nothing of his background. I knew nothing until you told me about it, really. I don't think I even read the New Times story, or I knew of Terry Earp's play, but I hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And so once I started to read the stuff after you gave it to me, I read your screenplay first, then went back, worked my way backwards. I was totally fascinated by the guy, And one of the reasons I think it's a legitimate subject for film is because there are many legendary restaurateurs. Part of my whole background is restaurant.
Right.
I worked as a kid. When I was 13, I was a bartender till I was 19 in the islands, and then when I got to New York, I worked two places where I was a bartender. And
you really worked there up through the period where you became,
until I became
a very well-produced playwright.
And even after I was a produced playwright, I went back to working in bars.
Right.
I was a bartender at Marvin Gardens.
Yeah.
And, I've told you 1,000 Michael stories, and Michael was an owner who had a personality larger than life. He didn't run with mobsters and stuff, but
but he had these stories.
The insanity of him. Yeah. And this is something that throughout my life I've come across restaurateurs who, many of them had larger than life stories. As a matter of fact, when I found, and I met a few restaurateurs who were low-key people, they stood out because they were so unusual.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
And when I thought about movies, Hollywood movies, there have actually been Hollywood movies where they featured in one way. Actually, one of the best-known restaurateurs was a guy, he might still be alive, named Buzzy O'Keefe, out of New York. And
Did they make a movie about him?
Well, they spun it, and that's what I'm getting to, is O'Keefe was one of these guys who would peak restaurants, and then at its peak he'd sell it, move on to another, and he was a big ladies' man. He always had beautiful women around him and all of that. And somewhere in the 40s, Hollywood had a screenplay on his life. And it, like all projects, you say it goes into development, it goes in one way, it comes out the other. And it came out ultimately as a film called Blue Skies, a musical with Bing Crosby playing the character.
Okay.
But Bing Crosby being a low-key personality, he turn the character not into such a large-scale, colorful guy, but a guy who was constantly on the lookout for romance and enjoyment, and was constantly selling restaurants.
Okay.
You see, like that. And so that's one. Another, I mean, several of the gangster characters, Love Me or Leave Me, the James Cagney character in that, I mean, that's what he does. And at the very end, he builds that restaurant, and he puts her in. The last line is, he said, you know, she's also a great singer, and about that, I was never wrong. But there's a wonderful moment, because I've heard other restaurateurs echo that. There's a moment when, close to the end of the film, where he comes in, and he's talking to a bunch of reporters. And the reporters say to him, you know, this place has always lost money. And look at it now. Look at it. What kind of designers did you bring in and entrepreneurs to really make it this kind of big-time hit that it was? And he said, I just brought myself in. And I've heard Mike say that. I've heard every restaurateur I know. So, you know, that's another feature film where, you know, yes, he is the co-star in the sense of its root ethnic story, but he was a restaurant owner. What's his name? David Jansen. He played King of the Roaring Twenties. I can't remember the guy's name, but he too was a restaurateur. One of the reasons for that is that the Watering Holes are where gangsters and people who are marginally, you know, connected to society and the outskirts of the law, so to speak, congregate. You know, that's that sort of their natural habitat. When you really think about it, Bugsy Siegel was a great restaurateur slash ultimate casino owner. You know, and so that's why he fits. Jack Durant fits into this so well, and that's why I want to see a story told, because one, I'm fascinated by the details of it. The greatest restaurateur of all in movies, of course, was Rick in Casablanca.
Totally.
And I mean, we always say, because whenever, you know, every restaurateur I knew, restaurant owner, had a lot of women around them, whether they were good looking or not, whether they had great personalities or not, no matter what. And I remember one friend said to me, he said, it's the Rick syndrome. He says, you know, he is the sun, and they are the satellites or the solar system, the planets that circle around him. And so there is a large tradition in motion pictures for this kind of character taking center stage. And so you're actually fitting into
that tradition.
The mainstream of that.
His relationships with women is a big part.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's as big of a part, or bigger than the mob.
Oh, yeah,
stuff,
really.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's what interests me more than the mob stuff.
Well, the mob stuff is titillating.
Right.
Because in a funny way, that's almost a cliche. You know, like that. Because, you know, from what I've read that you've given me and some of the other stuff I've read, he wasn't really a mobster. He knew them.
He knew them, and he may have done some things for them, but it wasn't. He wasn't a mobster.
No,
and that's the thing, is people thought, oh, you know, Durant is, you know, this Italian figure. I'm like, no, he's supposed to be from Tennessee. Is what people say. You know, he's really like a backwoods boy. You know, so that's interesting. But have you seen Dinner Rush with Danny Aiello?
Yes.
That's actually, to me, the best restaurant movie I've seen, because and I thought about it a lot when I was making this, because it's set all in a restaurant. It's kind of about this guy's, you know, one night, and you know, the restaurant may be just closing, and he's managing all these things, and there's some mob stuff in it too, and it's just a really interesting
I hadn't
film.
remembered that, but that is true. And I was just recently talking about Danny Aiello, because some friend was asking, he'd seen we were talking about Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, because I think it's the 25th anniversary, and they're showing it and stuff. And so this guy just saw the film for the first time, and he asked about Danny Aiello and wondered what happened to him. And I was saying that he's pretty much retired, because he's gotten up there in age, but he still works. You know? And I knew him out of New York, because I'd seen him in maybe 24 plays, you know, because he was one of those people who got to movies later. But he was constantly working. I mean, he was always on stage, and it didn't matter whether it was, you know, off Broadway or Broadway. As a matter of fact, the only time I think I saw him on Broadway was a play called Lamppost Reunion, which was all about it was a romantic clef about Sinatra coming back to a bar and hanging out with his old buddies. The main character was a Sinatra-like singer who had become famous. And I thought it was wonderful in it. And so he was very fresh in my mind is the point I'm making. Right. That he's just one of those actors that slip through the cracks. And you forget about him when you see him, you say, my goodness, this guy is really good. But that film, Dinner Rush, yes, I see what you're saying about that. But what you have that's different than that is you because Dinner Rush is really about managing and keeping all the balls in the air at the same time.
Exactly.
Where with Durant Never Sleeps, Never Closes. I get the titles all wrong. It really is driven by the power of his personality. Yeah. And because he is the center, he is the energy that informs it.
In that way, it's more when I wanted to talk about some of the movies that I was thinking about when I wrote it. Right. Because after I read her books, Mabel Leo's, there's tons of information about him and tons of different things that he did, and only half of them, maybe not even half, made it into the movie, of interesting stories of things like him, how he would drive his car onto the golf course with his dog and have his dog shit on the golf course, and then someone came up to him to say, you can't do this, and he goes, you see the Wrigley Mansion over there? I'm Mr. Wrigley. Right, and just totally bullshits this guy. And then from then on, the guy would take his dog around the golf course and crap on the... And I'm like, well, that's fascinating, but I can't really fit it into this film.
Into a straightforward narrative.
But anyway, going back to what I was going to say is, when I was thinking about it, I thought about two movies, and they're related, 8.5 by Fellini and All That Jazz with Roy Scheider. Yeah. And what you were saying about, what you just said about Durant sort of being this force throughout the whole thing, unlike in Dinner Rush where it's more just managing it, is Roy Scheider and All That Jazz is just this constant force who's pushing and trying to produce this musical and over here trying to direct this film and getting involved with this woman and that woman and dying and
but it's all driven by his personality.
Right, exactly. And that's what I was thinking about when I did this, is I wanted to do something without copying those films. I wanted to do something like that. And the same thing with Fellini's film, is that it really is driven by Mastroianni and not as much his personality, because he's a little more blank than Scheider, but still that idea that it's driven by this director figure. And that's how, because unlike you, I've never worked in a restaurant. The only thing I know about restaurant work is what you've told me, which I tried to incorporate. But at the same time, I thought, when I'm writing this character, who can I relate this character to? And I thought, exactly what I do. I produce and direct films. So when I was writing the thing, I was like, his world, his restaurant world, is my directing world. Exactly. And I'm managing these different things, and this is going wrong over here, and this is happening, and here's my ex-girlfriend coming in, and here's this. And so that's what I've told some of the people involved, including Sizemore, is I said, hey, this to me is very much a movie about running things wherever you might be, whether it's producing a film or a restaurant.
It's interesting you use that analogy, because I remember when I worked in restaurants, especially when my friend Mike owned it, that's what I thought. It's his production. As a matter of fact, I remember once, he fired a guy. And the guy turned to him and he said, "It's your movie, man." Right. And the guy walked. Awesome. You see? And so, the connection is there. Very true. Because that's exactly what the guy said. That guy turned out to became his own restaurateur. Also, his name was Spider. And Spider just said to Mike, he said, I'm not going to argue with you. It's your movie, man.
That's awesome.
So there it is.
That's awesome.
But now, talk about your actors that you have with this a little bit, because, I've gone through some of the adventures with you. I hear them, and they amuse me, and they're becoming part of the story, the lore that I tell other people now. Right. Okay. So,
I can't talk about all the juicy details.
I understand,
But, we decided...
The sure things.
Right. We decided that, this was a project... All of the projects we've done before this had Phoenix actors in it. And with this, first of all, and I don't mean any offense to our Phoenix actors, but there was no one I've met thus far who I thought they could play Jack Durant, right? there's that, and then in Phoenix, right? And the other element was I was like, I really want this film to go outside of Phoenix. And what I've learned in the last 4 years that we've been doing Running Wild is that without some kind of outside recognition coming in, someone from LA coming to Phoenix, it's very difficult to get that international recognition. Right. So I thought, let's go after some names. And I made a list of 10, 15 Durants, you know, and you and I talked about them. Some of them you thought, no, they're no good. You know, everyone from James Woods to Ray Liotta to older people, Rip Torn, Richard Dreyfuss, you know, just everyone that I liked and I thought could do it. Yeah. And with each one of them, it would have been a different Durant's never closes. I mean, Richard Dreyfuss, I think he's an amazing actor. People would say he doesn't look at all like Durant. I said, but he's powerful. It could have been a very interesting movie. But we ended up, when I was at the Jerome Film Festival, I got a call from Tom Sizemore's agent, and he was one of the top 10 people I'd offered it to. And they said he was interested. And over the course of a couple weeks, we worked out the deal. And we signed him, and I've spoken on the phone with him, and he's super excited about the film. And what I think is exciting is, I think he's a great actor, but he really hasn't had a role like this in a while. He was in a great movie that was made that didn't get the attention it deserved, called The Last Lullaby in 2008, which is based on a Max Allan Collins Hitman novel. And again, like I said, it just came and went, and it really didn't get the attention that it deserved. But other than that, you know, he's been working here and there. But I'm like, this is really a chance for him to shine. And
to see another aspect of his personality.
Right.
You get glimpses of, because he tends to play, I mean, they cast him as gangsters and tough professional men, Saving Private Ryan, you know, that kind of thing. Heat. You get glimpses of his personality, the quixotic nature of his personality in Heat. I love that moment when he says, for me, action is the juice. You know? And the smile that he gets there, you begin to see there's more to this guy as an actor and a personality than the kind of roles where he's just Mr. Tough Guy who goes a straight line, etc. And that's why I'm enthused about seeing him, you know, take this character on. I think that's a great idea, I mean, in terms of casting, to have him play the role. And so, and then, of course, there are a whole lot of other roles, female roles, that you are looking at people right now for.
Exactly. We're talking to some different people, and like I said, until something's official,
we can't
really say who they are, but we're, you know, going to people, to other, you know, female lead, female leads for the supporting roles and the main female lead role, to talk to them about this film. And then we're also going to some other character actor types to play there's a cowboy character who, as you know from reading the script, is one of the main, is probably the second biggest character in the film. He's a constant presence, and looking at some, you know, great sort of Western style actors for that. And there's a character named George that we're going after, some people in the sort of Richard Dreyfuss style, that type of character, that type of actor. We're going after people like that for. So, we just keep plugging away, and hopefully we'll have some news soon. The only other person that's officially cast in it is our Phoenix actor, who's also the casting director in the film. He didn't make this decision. I did. He's going to play Don Bolles. One of the reasons that I wanted to cast Hanlon in the Don Bolles role is that I want to make a movie at some point about Bolles, because it's a really interesting story, and it's only a small part of this film. But it's, like I said, to me, it's one of the most important things that's happened in Arizona, because what I didn't know is that, you know, you hear, okay, this reporter was investigating the mafia or corruption, land, you know, fraudulent land deals and all this kind of stuff. Very feels kind of a little bit like Chinatown. Then he got blown up, right? And supposedly right before he, you know, when someone first came to his car after he'd been blown up, he said these words, right, that sort of hint to this really important businessman at the time, Kemper Marley, right? As the, you know, he basically pointed the finger at Kemper Marley as the reason why he was getting blown up. but no one ever confirmed this, and the people that were convicted of the bombing, I mean, they seem like fall guys, right? Is that's the presumption. But what's more interesting than that, and I think what Affleck was going to do with the film, I presume, his film was going to be called The Arizona Project. And I did some research, and The Arizona Project was a book that was written about not so much what Bolles was doing, but after he got blown up, he had helped start this news journalist organization, and I can't remember what it's called, but all the guys from that came here, and we're talking 30, 40 journalists from all over the country, many different states. They came to Arizona, and they started this giant investigation to finish his work. And they say, and that's what that Arizona Project book is about. It's more about that, and that is, to me, it was one of the most important journalistic events in the nation's history, is these guys coming in and working together to try to do it. And they say, I haven't read the details, but they say, there were some incredible characters in these journalists. I mean, one guy who was just a brilliant guy, but just an absolute mess, messing around with prostitutes and drinking and, all kinds of craziness. So I can see what Affleck saw in that, considering what he's done since with stuff like Argo and things like that. You can kind of see his interest in it. But I'd like to tell the Bolles story and potentially the Arizona Project story at some point. That's why I cast Hamlin, is I'd like to continue that. Anyway.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, which I think just needs a little, at least from my perspective, a little clarification, and that's where you said you don't want to, belittle or disparage Arizona actors, why you didn't cast and why you looked beyond. One, in the growth of Running Wild, this is a natural step.
Right.
Simply because enough has been done here, and it's been contained. It's been a provincial kind of effort so far. And the next step, unless you just want to keep treading the same water, is to work in a larger field. Right. We're still being true to what we said about Running Wild, is that we don't go to Hollywood, we bring it to us. But yes, the expansion is required. Right. But beyond that, that also opens the door. I mean, I know you've had one big audition session to cast a bunch of actors. Right. And you're going to do a second and maybe even a third, right?
Yeah, we're just going to do a second because we really can't afford to do, just to keep going after the second one. Say, this is who we got, we're going to cast it.
But
the thing is, even if, I was telling my girlfriend this morning and I said, I would love to cast, say, a Arizona actress opposite Tom Sizemore in the lead, and that sort of elevates her to that level status-wise, right? That she's the co-lead. But at this point, I may not be able to do that. Hopefully, eventually, I can do things like that. But the thing is, even if we cast let's say the top 5 characters in the film with Hollywood name actors, there's 50 speaking roles in the movie. I mean, there's going to be 45 opportunities for Arizona actors to be in the film, to be playing scenes with these people, and then to get recognized. So it's still going to be a lot of opportunity for Arizona actors,
So, no, I just want to clear that up, only because, as I said, I think it's a next natural step. After the 52 films, you make one feature after another, but if you don't go beyond the borders, as it were, you're just doing it, almost becomes incestuous. Right. You're doing it for yourself. You're contemplating your navel. Yeah. So that's what I think. But as I said, just reading about the character, and I've read the screenplay, of course, I think the idea of it feels like it should make a real fun movie. Yeah. Beyond, it's not a meditative piece. This guy wasn't, that kind of character. He was, a big, larger-than-life, boisterous individual who made his presence felt, and it's still being felt. Because, as I said, the restaurant is there. The restaurant has been there for the longest while, and just about anybody when you come into town, that's the first place they take you.
Right.
You know, and as I said, it's so unusual. The first thing I'm walking through the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, like that.
It's an experience.
Yes, it's fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
good.
Yeah, I think it's a cool project, and lots of people are excited about it.
And it's also challenging you in brand new ways that you've never been challenged before.
No kidding. Yeah, and everything from trying to secure this name talent
Right.
to the other thing that we didn't discuss, and to me I think it's very interesting is for the first time in Running Wild's entire time making movies, we're going to be working on a soundstage on a constructed set. We're not shooting in Durant's. We're shooting, and we've never done that before, and it's a whole new ball game, and we're scouting different sound stages, and I've got a production designer that's working on designing the set, and in that way, to me, I start thinking, okay, I need to go back and study some of those films that were made in the old Hollywood period, like one of our favorites, Detour, where Edgar G. Ulmer, he shot the film in reportedly 7 days. I'm shooting the majority of our film in 6 days, so I'm just as crazy, right? And I keep thinking about how I would read stuff where he reused the same sets over and over again, and he would just throw fog in there, or something to cover it up. I'm not going to do that, but he would go and he would do all of the wide shots first, shoot the entire film, their wide shots. Then he would go back and do the close-ups, and I'm like, this is a totally different way of working, and pre-lighting, and before the whole idea that before Citizen Kane, that didn't really show ceilings much, and I'm thinking, well, we're not going to be showing ceilings, so it's a very different way of thinking about it, and sending my cinematographer Nick some films to watch, to try to kind of get in that zone, of what it's like to work that way. So that's a whole nother aspect. There's many lessons that I'm learning to make this.
Well, it's interesting because somebody had asked me recently, are you going to be shooting in Durant's? And I said, I think he's building a set. I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah.
But I said, I think he mentioned that he's building a set, but that he might use the interior of Durant's a little bit for, external shots.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is it's a period piece.
Right.
Which is something also. I mean,
which
so you've got
never done
costumes
before.
to deal with.
Yeah.
You've got automobiles to deal with. You've got a few other concerns that we haven't. That's why it's a growth process for the company. To take the next step. So.
And since I've never done that before, I want it to at least feel authentic, that it was set in that time. Because I recently watched a movie. You've seen it. It's called We Own the Night. James Gray. It's got Joaquin Phoenix and Mark Wahlberg. And it's supposed to be set in the late 80s in Brooklyn. And other than the cars, I kept on thinking, this feels like it's set in 2014. Like, there's nothing that tells... And I'm like, and I almost thought it's almost distracting that they're trying to say that, because it doesn't, so I really want to capture that feeling of that, that part that is set in the 70s, the 80s, the 60s, and stuff like that. So it should be an interesting challenge. Anyway, is there anything else that you want to cover on the film? Not
particularly, but what I wanted to say is that periodically, because for the people who pay attention or look at these things, we're talking about movies, but I think they also, because of the responses I've gotten, is they want to know a little bit about us and where we're going with things periodically. We can't every time do that, but I would say every 6 months or so, we'll give an update on things. And this being such a big project, I thought it was important for us to, vary from talking about old movie stars or new movie stars and talk about this. And so we've done it.